We often see in movies or on Instagram how, inspired by the Christmas atmosphere, people take their children to a shopping mall to meet that very same cheerful and friendly Santa. Do we ever wonder whether the smile and the beard may be hiding more than just Christmas magic? Can you imagine that the man to whom your child is whispering about the long dreamed of and desired present is not only a gift giver, but also a serial killer? Today, you will hear the true story of a mall Santa who, over the course of 7 years, killed at least 7 people. He got rid of the bodies in a very creative way. I have never seen anything like that before. Before we begin, I kindly ask you to hit the like button so you don't forget later. And to new viewers, I ask you to trust me and subscribe, because your subscription is the best gift for me. Brew yourself some tasty tea, turn off the lights, we begin. In Krakow, there was a series of attacks on. But let's start with this cozy little house that still stands on Mallory Crescent in Toronto. It belongs to the Fraser couple, Karen and Ron. They were greatly surprised when on January 18, 2018, the yard of their house was suddenly filled with people in white protective suits, forensic experts. The police gave the couple 20 minutes to gather their essentials and leave the property, because from that moment on it became the center of a police investigation. It is very strange and curious to watch your own house on television and to see neighbors you've never even met giving interviews talking about you and your home. The fact was that the police had received information suggesting that on the property there might be hidden remains of human bodies. Experts and dog handlers got to work. The first thing the dogs noticed was the flower pots dug into the soil. A tent was set up to thaw the ground and remove these pots, or more accurately, planters. The homicide detective Sergeant Hank Idsinga reported that the remains of at least 3 people were discovered in large planters that had been taken from the Frasers' house. This was at the end of January, and the couple was allowed to return home, though the searches still continued. And what do you think happened? On Thursday, February 1st, the experts discovered 3 more bodies. Altogether, 6 corpses. As Ron Fraser recalls that day, "It seems to me, as I remember it, at first, they said 5. And I thought, at least it's over. Suddenly, someone shouted, and another one. That really upset me. I realized it was far from the end." He was right. The cops dug up every inch of their property, using ground-penetrating radar and dog units. Luckily, the 6th corpse turned out to be the last one on that property. Perhaps I should explain what on earth was happening there. For more than 10 years, the Frasers had employed a gardener on their lot, or more precisely, a 66-year-old landscape designer named Bruce MacArthur. First, let's get to know Bruce through key moments of his biography. Thomas Donald Bruce MacArthur was born into a religious family on October 8, 1951, in Ontario. He grew up on a farm. I mentioned the religious family for a reason. Bruce was a closeted gay man. It was hard for him to accept his sexual orientation, since it was not considered normal in Canada at that time, especially in rural areas. In 1970, Bruce finished high school, where he met his future fiancée, Janice Campbell. Wait, you just said he was gay? What fiancée? The thing is, he lived a double life as a closeted gay man. We'll get to that. When MacArthur turned 23, he and Janice got married and moved to Toronto, not far from the store where Bruce worked. At that time, the gay village was taking shape. Such neighborhoods served as an oasis friendly to the LGBTQ community, full of gay bars, pubs, and so on. Well, you get it, things were going on. But Bruce struggled with his nature. So when, in 1979, he and his wife moved into a house on Ormond Drive in Oshawa, where their children Melanie and Todd were born, Arthur became increasingly active in the local church. In this way, he tried to avoid what he felt inside, namely, sexual attraction to men. And what do you think, did it work? Of course not. In the early 1990s, Bruce was more and more often cheating on his wife with other men. This went on until 1997, when they divorced due to financial difficulties. At that time, Oshawa did not yet have an open gay community, which pushed MacArthur to return to Toronto. There, he spent many evenings in the gay bars of the Church and Wellesley district, hired sex workers, including escorts, and during the day worked as a gardener. MacArthur started his own business, a landscaping company called Arctic Designs. Most of his clients were wealthy older women who found him charming, and he built up a large client base thanks to personal recommendations. And almost every winter, he made extra money by dressing up in a red Santa Claus costume and taking photos with children whose parents had brought them to the shopping mall. The first attack was recorded on October 31, 2001. That evening, 50-year-old MacArthur went with model Mark Henderson to Mark's apartment. Once they were there, Bruce hit Mark several times on the head with a metal pipe. He always carried that pipe with him. Henderson resisted until he lost consciousness. When he came to, he called 911. At the hospital, he received stitches and was prescribed 6 weeks of physical therapy. Bruce immediately turned himself into the police, but insisted that he did not remember the incident and had no idea how he could have done such a thing. Do you believe him? I did. The judge believed that Bruce MacArthur had repented, and he was given a 2-year suspended sentence. He was also banned from visiting Toronto's gay village and from using the services of sex workers. He was required to stay at least 10 meters away from the home or workplace of the victim. In addition, he had to submit his DNA to the database and undergo psychological and psychiatric counseling. Did the ban on visiting the gay village work? Both yes and no. In 2002, MacArthur registered an account on the dating site Recon, where he wrote in his profile that he was a dominant looking for a submissive partner. He also signed up on other similar platforms. People at his church found out about this and asked him not to come anymore. The church was not welcoming to everyone. As we can see, in the following years, he worked in landscaping, and things seemed calm until men who identified as gay or bisexual began to disappear without a trace in Toronto. Skandarai Navaratnam, or as his friends called him, Skanda, went missing on September 6, 2010. Police believed it was a murder, but there was no clue as to how it had happened. Until, 2 years later, on a cannibal forum called Zombaniat, an anonymous user posted a message claiming that he had killed someone in Toronto and then eaten the body. I decided to check the information and find the site, but it no longer exists, so I tried to search for a similar post in the Internet Archive. Unfortunately, for some reason, there is nothing at all preserved for 2012, but I allow that it could be true. Police investigated a possible connection between Skanda's disappearance and another already convicted serial killer named Luca Magnotta, but due to a complete lack of evidence, the connection could not be established. I am familiar with the Magnotta case. It's absolute horror. If you're interested in me reviewing that case as well, let me know in the comments. As it turned out, that post had been left by a children's hockey coach who, among other things, was writing to kids on that forum. In June 2013, detectives identified 2 more missing persons cases, Abdulbazer Faizi, whose family reported him missing in December 2010, and Majid Kayan, whose adult son reported him missing in October 2012. All of the missing men had a few things in common. First, they all belonged to the LGBT community. Second, all were South Asian immigrants. Third, they were all geographically connected, frequenting the same bars, bathhouses, and so on. Police began to suspect that a serial killer was operating in Toronto. Here's an interesting fact. Someone, still unknown, anonymously called the police and said that all 3 men were connected through their relationships with Bruce MacArthur. He was invited to the police station for questioning. Bruce admitted he knew all 3 men, but denied ever having any intimate relationships with them, saying they just occasionally hung out together. Nothing more, nothing less.
Okay, sir, so just before we begin here, I just want to let you know that we are being audio or video recorded right now because there's a camera just up in the corner, okay. And this device up here is a microphone, so it's picking up everything that we say, okay?
And so then I thought, okay, he likes it rough, so I put my hand to his throat, and just for a few seconds, because before that he's very strong, he just completely turned around and grabbed me by the throat. He said, now I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to you. And he had me by the throat to the point that I couldn't breathe. So I put my hands like up in the air like a surrender because I couldn't talk. And that's when he finally let go. And then he jumped out of the car. He said, I don't want to see you again.
And as we remember, there was no evidence, no hints, nothing concrete. So logically, Bruce was released. I can't help but note this is the classic situation where the villain is almost in the hands of justice, but in the end he slips away. That's what happened with Chikatilo, Catch, BTAK, and so on. In August 2015, another man disappeared, 50-year-old Iranian Soroush Mahmoudi. He went to work one day, and no one ever saw him again. But since Soroush had never been seen in gay bars or the gay village, his case wasn't linked to the series of disappearances. In June 2016, the police came closer than ever but still just missed. Bruce MacArthur ended up at the police station after one guy complained that Bruce had nearly strangled him while they were messing around in the back seat of his van. The excuse that it was just rough play worked, and he was released. On April 15th, 44-year-old Selim Izan went missing. Again, no leads. But everything changed on June 26, 2017, just 2 days after Toronto's Pride celebrations, when Andrew Kinsman disappeared. Andrew was very active on social media like Instagram and Facebook, but his phone went silent. When friends couldn't reach him, they went to his apartment. Inside, they found only his elderly 17-year-old cat left without food, water, or medication. Everyone knew Andrew would never abandon his pet. His disappearance mobilized Toronto's gay community and fueled rumors of a serial killer targeting gay men. 2 months later, police created a special task force called Project Prism, led by detectives Mike Richmond and Hankit Singha. The team also included an officer from the Sex Crimes Unit and officers from Toronto's 51st Division. The investigation was complicated by the victims' lifestyles. They used dating apps and often met people they had never seen before. But don't worry, detectives finally found something. Police called it the crucial piece of evidence. They believed Kinsman was killed on June 26th, and that Bruce MacArthur was the one who did it. How did they know? Pretty simple, actually. According to the BBC, police discovered a note in Andrew Kinsman's dated calendar on June 26th. That note had just one word, Bruce, and that was the last day anyone ever saw him alive. That day, surveillance footage from outside Kinsman's building showed a man resembling him walking up to a red vehicle. The image quality was terrible, as it always seems to be when it comes to security cameras, but experts were able to identify the model of the car. It was a 2004 Dodge Caravan. Running the plates turned up about 6,000 similar Dodges in Toronto alone. But the circle narrowed quickly. The last word in Kinsman's diary was Bruce, and only 5 of those cars were registered to men with that name. Investigators pulled footage from outside Bruce's residence. Bingo, the van was there, but the crafty bastard had already gotten rid of it, dumping the vehicle at a scrapyard. Guess the guy had watched too much Sopranos. Police tracked it down easily enough, though. The van was filthy, full of old coffee cups, and hadn't been scrapped yet. Forensics examined it and found traces of blood that matched Andrew Kinsman's DNA. Still, it was considered only circumstantial evidence. Detectives believed it wasn't strong enough to arrest MacArthur, but it was enough to justify surveillance and to secure multiple search warrants, all tied to the investigation labeled Bruce MacArthur. There were a lot of them, too many to list, but the key one gave police covert access to his apartment. Inside, investigators secretly copied data from MacArthur's hard drive. And what they found, to put it mildly, left them shaken. Bruce had not only 18 photos of Andrew Kinsman's dead body in the back of his van, but also pictures of Selim Izan, the man who had gone missing 2 months earlier. In the photos, Selim's lifeless body lay in MacArthur's bed. That was finally direct evidence. On January 18, 2018, undercover officers saw a young man enter MacArthur's apartment. Fearing for the man's life, they decided not to wait. They stormed the apartment. Inside, they found a terrified young man chained to the bed. His identity has been withheld, but it's known that he had met Bruce on the dating app Growler and that they had already hooked up 5 times before. MacArthur was arrested on the spot. Police seized all his devices and found even more photos of his victims. but still no bodies, only images and traces of blood. Which brings us back to where this disturbing story began. The Fraser property. Armed with a search warrant for the home where MacArthur worked as a landscaper, police moved in. As you already know, they struck gold. Authorities urged anyone who had hired MacArthur to come forward. When people did, police sent in cadaver dogs and forensic experts to comb through the properties. Investigators feared they might uncover dozens of bodies. Thankfully, the number wasn't that high. But the forensic teams worked tirelessly. Over months, they searched MacArthur's two-bedroom apartment, seizing 1,800 pieces of evidence and photographing every square inch. It became clear, Bruce MacArthur was a serial killer who, on the 19th floor of that apartment building, dismembered his victims and buried body parts in planters at his clients' homes. Despite the horrors unearthed in that garden, Karen and Ron Fraser still live at 53 Mallory Crescent. Still, they did hold a cleansing ceremony just in case. In January 2019, Arthur pled guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder. That meant there would be no lengthy trial. He was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. He has never publicly spoken about his crimes or what drove him to kill. Detective Itzinga later said that there was no evidence MacArthur had been involved in any other deaths, though investigations into unsolved cases remain ongoing. Take care of yourselves.